Well, welcome back to everyone who was with us for the SCC, and welcome in and happy Saturday to all of us joining us for the SPL. It is Dolson on desk all day, Mifflin though with me for set number one. Mifflin, we got to catch our breaths after a pentakill in the SCC just now and got some great SPL games on the lineup to round out this Saturday.
Man, I'm so pumped, but you know what? I said it earlier, I'll say it again. I am so incredibly pumped, in particular, for this Radiance Obey matchup, man. I mean, come on, dude. You can't not get excited.
It's going to be a lot of fun. Obey has certainly improved over the last few weeks. Radiance trying to defend that undefeated spot towards the top. That's not all we got today, though. Sanguine versus E-United to round out the day. So two teams, I think, there. In dire need of a win. Here are your standings going into today. SSG and Ghost tied at the top at 4-0. Keep your eyes on tomorrow. Those two teams will face off. But Radiance and Sanguine, I don't even really say neck and neck because third and fourth, but 3-0 for Radiance, 1-2 for Sanguine, 0-3 for United. So I think that kind of lends itself to my point of those two teams really needing a win down the stretch. Let's talk this one, though, Mifflin. Obey versus Radiance to start off the day for us on Saturday. Obey as well as E-United, kind of similar vein, needing a win here, but they have improved. We saw great strides in the early game from them last week, slowed down towards that mid-game where they ended up losing. But can you transition that early game into that mid-game, into that late game is the big question. How much of that do you think hinges on the solo lane here today, Miff?
Not too much, because when we see Obey win out in the early, it's almost never through the solo lane. It's always that 3v3 in mid, and I think this matchup in particular is going to be really exciting for that 3v3, because against Radiance, I think that is a team that is more susceptible to snowball than maybe any of the other top 3 seeded teams that we're seeing in Phase 2. Ghost Gaming, obviously, you're not going to snowball them. They're snowballing you. You know, it's... When against Radiance, though, especially at the Phase 1 playoffs, we saw that if they weren't quite able to get their footing in the early, that's really where they struggled. And Obey showed us last week that early game is their strength.
That's right. Sino sort of took over the early game last week. A lot of, good plays here from Ducky in the past, and I think I kind of bring up the solo lane here, and maybe good to be looking at Ducky in that conversation, because what we saw yesterday was this meta of Cthulhu and Amaterasu, teams okay to let one or the other through as long as they got the opposite on the other end of it. So I think big things in store for Ducky today, and you have to carry that extra weight. So I agree with you in that early game, maybe hinges elsewhere on the map for Obey, but keeping the team in these fights, engaging, disengaging, all that fun stuff, I think a pretty heavy emphasis mid to late. Out of the solo lane. Now we're going to pivot that same conversation, I think, Mifflin, to Benji, a guy who was in that conversation around the Cthulhu, the Amaterasu, can play them near the top of the league in those categories. What do you think of what you've seen from Benji so far here this phase?
It's that recency bias, man, but all I can really think of is that one time he threw away his life to those minions. But other than that, this guy is the pinnacle of consistency. Yeah, I gotta let it go, man. But he's always been in that conversation of one of the best solo laners in the world, if not the best solo laner in the world, because he's always been able to perform at an incredibly high level. He hasn't necessarily been the one shining through for his team every single time, but he's never lost your team a game. He's never been the reason you weren't able to control a match. Benji's always been able to hold his own no matter who he plays against.
That's right, and he was one of kind of the first ones, I think, to lean into Bologna. We saw a small highlight there. Maybe lends itself to some off-meta picks maybe later on here today. Quick thoughts, though, and we'll be able to dive into this. I know we're going to hear from Benji here in a moment. What do you think of the jungle matchup we'll see here today? We'd be remiss if we don't talk about it, adapting up against Sino.
Oh man, the Adapt King versus Sino, who is the most mechanically talented player on Obey. It's interesting. I think now that Sino's decided that he's really going to shift away from those warrior supports, we might see a state of parity in the jungle. Sino's incredibly talented. Maybe we see Nemesis highly contested for both teams. If we see Nemesis get taken away, we've always seen that Adapting is willing to fall back to that Daji. I think it really comes down to how highly either team is going to prioritize their jungle pick, and then once they take that pick, it's whoever's going to play the role better. If one person takes Robin, I expect to see them making fireworks in the early game. If both teams take these late game centric gods, Nemesis, Hebois, something like that, maybe it's a little bit quieter out of the junglers today.
Gonna be a lot of fun, Miff, to watch the picks and bans break through from those two. We talked about the solo lane, we brought up Benji, and for good reason. I was able to sit down with Benji, hear how he's feeling going into this set against Obey. Alright, thank you very much. We are down here with Benji, the solo laner for Radiance. They've got a matchup versus Obey today, so we'll be picking his brain a little bit, see how himself and the team are feeling. Benji, great start to Radiance so far here in phase number 2. Kind of zoomed out perspective for us, grade yourself, A being the best, F being the worst, somewhere in between. How do you think the team has performed kind of counter to the expectations of the team coming into the phase so far?
We're doing pretty well, we haven't lost yet. So that's pretty good. I mean, obviously for us, the goal is just to win. We got second at MSI, right, and that wasn't really hitting the expectations since everyone on this team has won so much before, so... Yeah, really, we're just trying to keep the momentum going right now. But yeah,
I think it's very important. Love to hear it. You get a good, strong performance at the MSI. Keep that momentum going throughout the start of the phase. Now, more individually, maybe. What do you think the state of the solo lane is at the moment? Maybe some strong meta picks. Obviously, Amaterasu has been maybe the most highly prioritized pick. Do you think that continues here this week?
Probably, yeah. I mean, nothing has really changed, so... Yeah, it'll be pretty similar to what it's been.
Fair enough. More Amaterasu on the menu for the solo laners. And kind of to flip the script to maybe a different role, Adapting has been performing so well for you guys. What do you sort of make of your teammates' performance? Is it kind of a state of the meta thing? Obviously, he's a very strong player nonetheless, but what do you think caters to Adapting having such a great phase so far?
I don't know. I mean, usually... jungler is just good when the team is doing good, so we've been winning, he's been looking good, it's kind of how it goes.
Hey, fair enough. It's a good way of looking at it. Kind of last thoughts here, you're going up against Obey, who have looked pretty improved over their last few games. What's your take on your opponents here today, and where's your confidence stand?
We're going into it thinking it'll probably be pretty easy, but anything can happen, so.
That's right. Can't look over any opponents. Benji, best of luck in your set today, and thanks for sitting down with me.
Yeah, thank you.
Benji, confident as always, and for good reason. This is a Radiance team that hasn't fallen just yet so far in Phase 2 of the SPL. One thing Mifflin and I have talked about is where the picks and bans would kind of shift where these two teams build their lead into this game. Obey has shown it through the jungle, Radiance has done a good bit as well. So picks and bans will tell us a lot of where the minutia of this set is going to break through. Mifflin, the solo lane conversation I do think needs to continue here, and kind of the team mindset of letting through Cthulhu and Amaterasu, getting yourself one or another. Is that something you assume we see continued today?
I think Cthulhu might outshine Amaterasu just a little bit, so it might be necessary to at least ban him out. Amaterasu, obviously the next best pick out of solo lane, going to be highly contested, likely first picked. I'm sorry, Dave, it's just hard for me to shake this in my mind. Benji said it was going to be easy, dude. He said the word easy.
I said he was confident.
About the Obey boys, dude, man. Oh, man. Hopefully they did do a little bit of prep, because Obey is looking a lot better off every single week. But as far as picks and bans go, I expect to see largely standard bans, and you know what? We haven't seen it just yet, but I'm willing to bet Freya and Oleron don't make it through here.
Yeah, no Obey jersey on, but we know where the heart is, Mifflin, through and through. No Cthulhu, no Amaterasu just yet. Freya, you and I were blown away, really overlooked in the SEC earlier on today. Won't be the same case up here at the SPL level. Freya taken away by Radiance, Persephone first ban there for them, Oleron to follow suit. So then that obviously caters to the conversation of which teams, if either, feel comfortable jumping down that tier, I suppose, to the Souls, the Chronoses in the game. We'll have to see if Obey or Radiance feel comfortable moving into that one. A lot still left onto the table, and the Kuzenbo just confirms that. So the solo lane conversation we've had still stands true here, one or the other. Definitely available for both sides. But the Hercules, also a notable difference, especially when Aurora is on the enemy team. Normally banned out, but this time going to be picked away by Obey.
I think it is a smart pick away, but it leaves open both Cthulhu and Amaterasu, and both gods are able to flex between roles. Amaterasu's seen success in the jungle. She could likely be played in support, obviously incredibly strong inside that soul lane. Cthulhu can be played support or solo as well, so if Radiance choose to, they might take away both right here, and if Obey thinks Hercules is worth the value of losing out on two of those top tier characters, I'll be surprised to see it.
Yeah, I'm curious. Earlier today, and I don't know if it's in store, because earlier today it was both Freya and Oleron were available, and you and I wanted them both to get locked in, and we weren't able to see that. Cupid, though, and I don't even know how really sneaky it's all been. I mean, we just saw Cupid Penta, just an hour ago. Really started to move into the eye of particularly mid laners, still in that hunter role as well, but Cupid, very strong pick at the moment.
Yeah, I think recently we've been seeing him more and more in mid because of that heart bomb change. Now it does 25% more damage to minions, makes it a lot easier for him to be left alone in a lane. Around level 3, his wave clear should be able to at least match the majority of late game centric mages. So now Cupid's got a very strong fight potential in the 3v3 in mid. He's not going to be struggling too much with wave clear, but that doesn't necessarily mean we're going to see Cupid in mid here. He's still absolutely fantastic in that long lane, so I think we're going to have to hold our thoughts on that until Radiance fills out a little bit more of their draft.
Right, all the same mechanics apply, just over to the long lane instead of in mid, depending on where he goes. Now it's a Horus locked in here, and we're gonna assume that's over for Aurora there in the support role. Horus very strong for a while there in phase 1. I still think mechanics-wise very strong in the team play that surrounds this god. Hasn't quite seen the same level of play, but do you still think he's at a point here that makes him a pretty strong threat against Obey?
I think Horus is a god that it's more comfort-based. He's obviously going to be pretty strong no matter what. He's got a stun, a knock-up, a global ultimate to drag your entire team throughout the map. He's got healing, so out of combat, he's going to be an absolute force to deal with. It's just that Horus has these large degrees of variance. Again, especially in a gods like Nemesis, who are going to be able to lock him down pretty easily, force him to use CC on him, and then disengage. I think Horus, his main weakness is likely the one trick of his engagement. He's always going to be looking to dash in, find that stun, followed up with a knock-up, and that's pretty easy to play around if you can see him.
I'm nervous if I'm Obey of a Cthulhu suddenly teleporting in behind my team with whoever else from Radiance dare step into that Horus ultimate. A Scylla locked in here. Pretty interesting when you consider all of the mages that are still available here, Mifflin. Do you scratch your head at all at the Radiance mid lane pick?
I think Scylla, and as the season goes on, at the beginning of Season 7, I went on record to say I didn't think Scylla was very strong. The recent itemization changes and just changes to the meta have really started to form its way around this Scylla pick. She's an incredibly potent pickup, and with the sustain, or rather the setup that Radiance have, Horus is going to look for that knock-up and stun. I'm a Monster's going to hit you. Cthulhu looks for a 4-man knock-up. I mean, I'm a Monster, it's gonna hit you. There's so much to set up for this Scylla that I think it fits in well. But Radiance's draft is lacking pressure across the map so far. I mean, Cthulhu's gonna be able to lock down his lane. It should be relatively even, but Horus and Cupid, not necessarily the most pressure-centric comp. And then Scylla in mid, I mean, until level 6, you're not even able to clear the archers.
Right. Well, Mifflin, if you look at Obey's first couple of sets here in this phase, there was kind of a lack of meta identity, I guess, that they hadn't quite figured out how this meta was going to work for them and how they were going to work in the meta. Last week, despite a loss, looked great in the early game. We've already hashed that out, but it wasn't a pick-ban issue necessarily. I think we continue to see that here in Game 1 against Radiance, where they have drafted themselves a great composition. If you're strictly looking at strength of individual gods and even maybe how they work together, I think Obey have pulled a very strong 5 together.
I think they have, and Radiance finishes off their draft with that Robin, immediately addressing the issue that I saw, which was lack of pressure. Robin's got that, and he's got it all over the map because it's likely going to the jungle. As far as 5-on-5s here, Obey certainly look a lot better. Hercules, Nemesis, and Amaterasu are some of the best in class. Soul, one of the magical hunters. Ring of Akate, abuser. I can already see it spammed in the chat. And then Heimdall, one of the safest hunters with a fantastic beads burning ultimate, CC immunity in his kit as well. It'll be interesting to see how this flames out. And Soul could go mid. Soul could go into the hunter role. Heimdall can flex as well. Radiance is going to have to be on their toes.
Well, it is time for Obey to change from looking improved to have won here up against Radiance, one of the tougher opponents to go up against. Game number 1, let's kick it off.
Thank you so much, Dave. Gormizer down here alongside me is Aggro for the cast on this one, and it's going to be an interesting one. I'm actually excited to see what you think, Aggro, in just a second, but before we get into that, chat, remember, there's going to be a poll as to who you think will win the set that you can go ahead and vote on, and, well, go ahead and tell us what you think going forward for this. But Aggro, I mean, from top to bottom, I'm having a hard time poking any holes in Obey Alliance's draft. It is pretty much solid every single role.
Agreed. They've got good CC, they've got good damage, they've got early game, they've got some late game insurance as well. I do think that they are a little bit susceptible to this Cupid ult, but that's somewhat unavoidable with a lot of kits these days, and it's a reason why Cupid is so prevalent in the meta right now, is that his ultimate just shuts down a lot of very, very strong meta gods. So as long as Cyno in particular can really stay out of the way of that Fields of Love, inbound as well, those are the two that really have to be concerned about it more than anybody else. And other than that, I think that their draft looks pretty solid.
I'm a little surprised by this, though. Wolfie taking the Soul into the mid lane over the Heimdall, which is something that we've seen a lot of teams, Renegades comes to my mind maybe first and foremost, have been doing. Do you think that's going to give them some merit? Does the Heimdall have maybe a better matchup against the Cupid than the Soul does?
No, I think it's the exact opposite. I think Soul has a fantastic matchup against Cupid because she's slow immune while she's channeling Disapparate, and that basically entirely neutralizes Cupid's ult in the laning phase. I'm very surprised that we see it go this way, honestly, because I think Heimdall can struggle a little bit more because that Fields of Love will shut down his teleport off of the Bifrost, which is annoying but not necessarily death for him since he has a CC immunity on casting Through the Realms. But this is a much harder matchup for Wowie, and I think that's my biggest surprise point, is that we don't see this Soul over here in the long lane, because I think that is such a safer matchup, but must be something that Obey's looking for elsewhere.
Man, well, even with a solid draft, it's not going to matter. Their stuns are going to be able to lock you down. Good from Aurora and good from Cyclone Spin. A little bit of a misplay from Inbound, missing the knock-up. Unfortunately, left him in a bad spot. And now there's going to be pressure for the duo lane. And well, now that 81% is feeling even more sure of themselves there that voted for Radiance in chat. And you can see it. I mean, they kind of talked about it on the desk, but Benji obviously having no big issues with his lane as of right now. Amaterasu locked under tower. And with that kill over there in the duo lane, it's definitely going to start things up a little earlier for this Cupid. I mean, how do you try to get the early game control in your favor here? That's something that Obey did really well last time. Is it all on the back of this Hercules?
It can be, though this is a good start. Aurora just hitting level 3 in time to not be under too much kill threat. I think that you're looking for her to be the one who buys you space in this early game. That's what Aurora and Mike, the two premier Hercules players in the SPL, do the best on this pick, is they just create space and force carries to really pay attention to them on rotations and really respect their damage. And when you fall behind, you lose some of that respect from the carries, which is a big reason why you play this pick. And that's why that play is even more concerning. And it's really, look, being inaccurate with the mechanics, that happens to everybody.
Oh, yeah.
That's not an Obey-specific problem. What's more concerning to me is that I don't think that play works out even if Inbound hits the play. I just think the decision-making was bad there, because you look at the kill threat that you have with Heimdall in comparison to Horus Cupid on the other side. I just don't see a world in which that would have really been super advantageous for them either way.
Well, so far, Adapting was able to invade a blue buff. It seems like Cyno is going to try to return the favor here and take away and strip off this red buff away from Big Man, just to try and slow things down there, either for the mid lane or the jungler, whichever one he wants to do. And I think this is a good call, realistically, when it comes down to it. I love the fact that Cyno's gone for the Nemesis. You know, we're getting a little worrisome about him, worried over him, just because of the fact that he was locking in those warriors in week 1. Now, seeing that the Nemesis is coming through, seeing that he's more than willing to even go into Adapting's jungle right now, I think showcases a good level of strength coming out of the jungle that Obey need right now.
Certainly a lot of fanfare about Cyno's selections in the jungle whenever they were warriors, for sure. And look, I think that as a whole, as a group, SMITE fans are really, really results-oriented, and Adapting looking for some results in mid, but what, 20 damage short of finding the second kill for Radiance, but good job by Wolfie at least holding the relics, knowing that they wouldn't have made the difference either way. I just think that Smite fans are far too results-oriented. Just because Obey was losing with Warriors in the jungle doesn't mean that they were losing because of Warriors in the jungle. And so I think that Sino has gone back to more Assassins. Clearly they feel like they can find a little bit more value with them, but don't think that they're going to stop playing Warriors in the jungle entirely.
Oh,
If
no.
Sino sees a good Vamana jungle composition, he's locking in Vamana jungle. It's not the class that's going to stop him. It's really what he thinks that is going to give them the best chance to win.
All right, now Benji getting aggressive into Ducky, but right behind him, Sino, it's Wolfie that are hanging around in the area. Cthulhu is not someone that's easy to take down or easy to mess with, especially with Benji having his ult available, and so they're not going to opt for the kill potential. They're just going to try to secure their own blue buff and successfully do so, as they just make sure Ducky is going to be able to maintain in this lane. And honestly, I love the way that they're kind of prioritizing this, because I don't think Ducky needs to necessarily win this lane as much as it is that Amaterasu, as she transitions into that late game, is really good at team fights. She's got the healing, she's got prot shred, the ults, everything just feels like it pays into that late game. So just keep him afloat for a little while and hope that he can do Ducky things later.
And that's the game plan for sure, because it is really easy for Ama to just be an impact player in these team fights, even without having the world's best ultimates or anything like that, because just contributing tons of damage or tons of movement speed to multiple people on your team is super valuable no matter what you're doing. So that's why Ama is really known as this team fighter. It's because she has this aura that you're going to level second that is going to take a little bit to get ready to go. And then she's going to provide value no matter what she's doing in the team fight, as long as she's not isolated and by herself.
I'm always interested to see, you hear the blink, you see inbound go in, and I'm waiting for the moment to drop, because we've seen what Hercules can do in a lane. Honestly, sometimes by himself, but with a good hunter behind him as well, and Wowie on the Heimdall will hit hard. But it's just so difficult to think about it. I mean, you've got healing from Aurora, you've got healing from Cyclone Spin, Prot Shred as well on that horse. There's going to be the Fields of Love even, I think, wanting to get a fight going, just unable to completely lock down inbound here. But I think it's, again, a showcase of where Radiance's mindset is, which they're not really worried about Obey right now.
No, they don't. They really don't need to be, because the where the pressure is going to be from Obey is this duo lane, and with this matchup of Cupid versus Heimdall and Cupid versus Hercules, as long as Fields of Love is up, it makes it a lot harder. But no coincidence that as soon as that ultimate is down, Obey is able to get a little bit more room, and they need Adapting to come over and make sure that they secure their purple, which he does successfully. But that's really what I think is the stopgap for this pressure from Obey, is this Cupid ult.
Doesn't seem to be stopping them anywhere else either. Benji continually getting aggressive into this blue buff, and now a big rotation. Ducky looking for the stun, but that's going to be I'm a Monster for the CC immunity from Big Man. He's going to be able to get out safely. Adapting rotates in just to kind of flex on him, make sure no one's around. Even the Horus ult committed from Aurora to make sure he gets over here. Now it almost feels like they need to have something happen for Radiance, because they committed so much to coming over to this side.
They're not going to be able to find a whole lot. I mean, buffs are down on this side of the map. Pyromancer's not spawned yet. I mean, they could try and fight over these, but a nice overhead kick from Adapting makes sure that he doesn't get pushed by Inbound. By the way, I want to bring up Inbound's boot choice. A little bit interesting. You don't see tank boots on Hercules very often, because it's the least aggressive option. It just has the least amount of damage. But against how much CC Radiance has, that crowd control reduction's great. You don't really get the value from the dot damage that would normally stack up that passive when we often see people go these tank boots, but I kind of like it here for Inbound. It does bring his overall damage level down, but I think that Obey has enough elsewhere in the draft that I'm not too worried about them losing it. Soul's a little bit low at this point in the game in terms of outright player damage, but I think that overall this boots pickup for Inbound is pretty well thought out.
No, I think just based on the pace of the game so far, but also the trajectory of the way these characters all scale, all of the gods in the game, it kind of feels like both teams have more strength in their late game, even though, like you highlighted, Hercules maybe isn't going to be hitting as hard as we could see. I think, still just as good as a tank and setup. You've got Wolfie, Sino, Wowie, who are going to scale well. I'm kind of wondering, and I wouldn't mind your thoughts on this as well, which team's just going to perform better? Cupid never sat in my mind as a late-game hunter, but then you have Scylla, who's a monster, literally, late-game. Does any team have a benefit of making this go the distance?
I think Obey probably scales slightly better into the late game. Heim is really hard to team fight against on Fire Giant dances because he can track everybody on the other side, and it's really easy for him to have perfect information at all times. Ama, we've already covered as a late game monster, and Soul is pretty solid come late game. I think that Obey's objective damage is fantastic come late game because they'll be grouped up using that Ama aura, and then you've got double auto attackers, which is always really difficult to beat.
Well, Cyclone Spin going to get aggressive, forces the boulder out of inbound, eats the damage like it's nothing, and is able to take down the support there. And that's 2 deaths now onto inbound, which at this point maybe doesn't mean a whole lot, but it showcases where Cyclone Spin's pressure is so far in the long lane. Cyno having to come over to help Wolfie, but Radiance feeling very confident now in their ability to get aggressive and in the jungle. Red Buff's about to respawn. If they stay long enough, they'll be able to pick it up, and it seems like Adapting's going to spot it out just in time. They have 4 members over here, and no one on Obey is here because Cyno, well, went with a cheeky steal, went up and took away Adapting's speed buff. So maybe buff for buff, at least making a decent trade there.
But Adapting, very wary that Cyno knows his speed timer. He tried to steal it on the last respawn. We'll just pick up the red, which is probably more valuable anyways.
Well, now inbound, hit by the I'm a Monster. Pyromancer goes the way of Obey, but once again they lose a kill in the process, and now the aggression seems to be here in mid lane. Benji going to be able to proxy a little bit, and this is opening up the position for a Cthulhu rotation if they so want it. But as of right now, it seems like Radiance are held at bay. Not quite far enough in the game to feel confidence diving a tier 1 to try and burn it down, but confident enough to look for fights. Benji managing to come on over, but they can't quite get everything to line up the way they wanted to. They're almost there on every single engage. They managed to pick up inbound, but there's no way to follow up on anybody else.
Not a lot of objectives stolen here by Radiance either, and even though they're up 3-0, about a 1,000 gold lead, it's a good position to be in, but not a game-breaking one by any stretch. And eventually these kills on inbound won't really matter that much anyways.
Well, Ducky now trying to just save himself as he's locked down by 3. That's just going to be a kill onto the solo laner here. Adapting credit for that one. Now 2-0-0. And in my eyes, it opens up that rotation. Gold Fury is available, but you can see nobody on Obey in a good position to do anything about it. Inbound potentially going to be under threat once again by Cyclone Spin, who wants to continue pressuring out this Hercules. Now a 4-level lead over the support, 1-level lead over his opposing carry. And it's just those little things that are going to start making this big difference. I mean, almost everybody, save for the jungle there and Adapting, has some sort of lead over Obey right now.
It's really just been a pretty Radiance-paced game. I'm not going to say slowly paced game, because it hasn't been, but this is kind of the way that Radiance likes to play. They want to group up as 5. That's where their real team strength comes from. And they'll take their wins where they can get them, but they won't force it like some other teams might.
Gold Fury started up here and burned down faster than I could even start to say it by Obey Alliance. So the good call from them. That's 2 objectives uncontested by Radiance in the early game. And you were talking about the 1,000 gold that they maybe had there for Radiance, but you can see it's dissipated to the point where Obey are closer than ever at this point in the game. It really is going to come down to trying to turn some of these picks around. Those 4 deaths that they have across their team maybe going to start wearing on them a little bit more. But I mean, they kind of like this base. At least in my eyes, it kind of feels that way because they don't seem to be too worried about having specifically inbound picked off 3 times. And, you know, losing Ducky once hurts, but it's not the end of the world.
The front line is pretty far behind for Obey, and that is a concern if Radiance start to group. But unless Radiance forces Obey to start to group, it won't really matter that much because they'll scale eventually anyways. And I think that was a pretty smart map macro play there by Obey. They don't just happen to pull gold whenever there's no one there. Radiance has their speed buff and blue buff up on the right-hand side. Adapting is going to want to be there, especially when his last speed got invaded, so they know that they're going to have a man advantage.
And well, Cyno going to come over, ult down onto Cyclone Spin, diving the tower, but that's going to be the Aegis used to keep Cyclone Spin alive alongside the Fields of Love. And now the aggression's over here once again on the solo lane side for Radiance. The question is whether or not they want to get super aggressive, and the answer seems to be yes, onto Wolfie, of all people. Aurora looking for the lockdown. The stun's going to be good, but Disapparate is just such a strong ability to get you out of there, and Wolfie might even be able to turn this around. The rest of Obey has come in, adapting, forced to ult away, but it's not going to be enough to get him out alive. That's going to be a kill for Wolfie, and now a looking disengage for Radiance. They're just trying to walk away with their lives.
Really good pickup and push there by Inbound, but Adapting just doesn't use his beads until the very end. He gets displaced and eats all the damage, and then decides to use his Purification bead so that he can try and get into the Horror Assault with Aurora on the way out. Just some poor relic usage there from Adapting opens up a kill for Obey.
Now Radiance kind of in an unsure position, push back, and this is what we saw a little bit out of Obey last week. Maybe not to the same extent as they were able to against SSG, but a very solid first 15 minutes. That was the consistency in both games when they were playing up against Space Station. It was unfortunately, though, around that 15-minute mark, as it transitioned into the, quote-unquote, the late game, when Fire Giant started being an option, things like that things started to fall apart, and you started to see Space Station pick it up. Now, with this draft, we've kind of mentioned being very solid, kind of towards this later stage of the game. My eyes are on how they can take this small, I want to say disadvantage right now. They're still a little bit behind technically, and turn it into something and flourish with it. It's where they can put that pressure right now. No big objectives on the map outside of that Fire Giant means they don't have anywhere to really turn with any advantage they get.
Yeah, I think that the way that Obey has played this so far has been very smart. They've not forced themselves into bad spots, and Radiance is a team that will often let you get into the late game because they feel like they'll beat you there. And most of the time, they're right. They usually draft very strong, grouped up comps. Their comps are really focused on winning at that point in the game, and I think that's where a lot of the players' strength lies, is in that late game team fighting phase. But I think that Obey has done a good job of really trying to beat Radiance at their own game and drafting just a really strong late game objective composition that Radiance will have to answer eventually. And Radiance has not built enough of a lead to where that won't really come into play so far. I mean, we haven't seen a full 5-on-5 yet. I'm not sure that Obey's composition is actually better grouped up fighting 5v5, but their objective burn and secure is really, really good. Secure not better than Ting's, of course, but just the amount of damage they'll have on these objectives, Fire Giants, Towers, Phoenixes, things of that nature, is going to be hard for Radiance to deal with. So I want to see Obey really focus on getting coverage, ward coverage, and then being the aggressors around objectives where they can utilize that pressure to find advantageous fights. They can't just really group up and jam 5-on-5 fights in neutral ground on Gold Fury. They've got to be the ones pulling Gold Fury and using that threat of their burn damage in order to pull Radiance into bad spots.
Well, we were talking earlier about the slow, like Fields of Love, nice big AoE. Of course, Crush brings one in as well. So a couple of Wing Blades picked up by Obey Alliance. One there onto the Nemesis, who you had highlighted would struggle against those ults and abilities. But while I was looking through the items, the thing that caught my eye is the Rod of Tahuti. It's something I feel like I haven't seen in ages. Picked up here by Big Man Tings. What is it bringing for the Scylla, and why pick it up over some of the other more prominent items we've seen in mid lately?
It's a good question. I feel like a Desolation might have just been a little bit better in this spot, but won't have a chance to look at the burn damage. There it is from Obey, and again, they're forcing Radiance into an awkward position, but Ducky might be the one to pay.
Yeah, Fields of Love looking to lock him down. It's going to pop. It's going to get the kill there, but it's only Ducky that's in danger right now. Everybody else seems to have been able to get away. Inbound looks to walk towards mid lane the wrong way and actually pushes himself out of the I'm a Monster. Alive so far, the healing doing what it can, but they're diving the tier 2 tower. Benji's going to be able to pick up that one, so it's still 2 for that Fury, but it feels like a good fight for Obey. It just depends on the pressure Radiance can continue to mount here as they push across the map in mid and left.
Oh, great job by Aurora. Reads the teleport coming in from Wowie. Waits out the CC immunity as well. Adapting with a pre-beads and perfect holding of his abilities. Wowie played that as well as you could ask. I don't think Wowie can do a whole lot different in that spot. That's just really, really well executed by the support and the jungler for Adapting, or for Radiance. And look, if you ask Obey going into that fight, hey, you're going to lose 2 of your frontliners for that Fury, they're probably on the fence on whether or not that's worth it. if they only have lost, if they would have only lost Ducky, that would have been way better. Inbound had just not very good pathing into mid lane, and really turned that fight from good for Obey to now definitely bad for Obey, because then they end up losing Wowie because of the pressure that Radiance has on the map. They end up losing their tier 2. Sure, Obey gets a Pyromancer, and Obey's overall macro game has been excellent so far this game. It's been really good. The initial Gold Fury pull, I love the way they pulled that Fury, just knowing that they've got the damage. They've done 2 Pyromancers. I think that they've been really smart about how they're playing the map. It's just come down to individual mistakes after that. Ducky proxying when he should, inbounds pathing multiple times that have really put Obey behind the 8-ball.
So now it's given Radiance the ability to do something like that. Body blocking Ducky. Benji doing so well to try and make sure that the Amaterasu stays in the Fields of Love, which is going to be able to get out of there. Forces the ult, though, from Ducky. And now with Obey rotating in, they might be able to look for something. They want a kill. They're going for the pluck onto Benji, of all people, but I don't know if he's the target. The healing paying its way in gold here for Radiance. It's going to keep them all topped off if they want to get back into this fight. And this is a very solid positioning for them. I mean, one fight right here in the jungle could easily turn into an advantageous Fire Giant fight. And it's going to be a Roar going in with the ult, but it's Benji now, chasing down anyone and everyone he can. Disapparate going to keep Wolfie safe in the backline, but Sino is isolated. Ducky looking to come in for the save, but it's not going to be able to do too much. Inbound throws out the boulder, adapting. He's low, he's gone, as Sino picks up the kill, but he's going to trade out his life in the process. Benji finds a double kill from the front line, and that's going to be able to get rid of 2 big carries for Obey, and now Radiance are going to go ahead and take their way with the map.
And now it's no secret what Obey's game plan is in these team fights. It's kill Benji in this ultimate. Sunder pick up by Ducky, and Nemalt saved for as soon as Benji goes up into that Cthulhu ult. But without the Sunder there, I think Benji just gets a little bit too much value still. He's able to peel back and then surge forward at the perfect time as soon as that Nem ult really wears off. Adapting's the casualty for it, but it's still a 1 team fight for Radiance.
Well, Big Man Tings is around with I'm a Monster, but the Fire Giant's not low enough for the secure yet. Wolfie looking to get locked down, again showcasing what Soul can do in terms of survivability, but Benji just does not seem to care about the damage thrown at him. He is scoffing it off like it's nothing, and able to retreat, but Obey do a good job. They at least stop the Fire Giant from getting taken, so the snowball controlled here from Radiance as they get, well, not handled, but at least zoned away this time.
Really nicely done by Wolfie, coming in from an alternate angle from his front line. I think caught Radiance a little bit off guard. It holds all his relics, so he's a braver man than I, for sure, with that much CC and damage coming his way, but he knew Disapparate's timer was coming up, so he stays nice and safe, doesn't lose anything for it, and he, alongside the front line, are able to get off, or get Radiance off of that Fire Giant pretty nicely. I think that the pieces are there for Obey to win these team fights. That last team fight recap actually had Obey dealing more damage than Radiance, but it was just pumped into a gigantic Cthulhu that's really hard to bring down. I think if they're able to time this Nemalt and Sunder properly, then they've got a chance to win the fights.
Well, Adapting's been the one getting bullied pretty much throughout the game. The 2 kills Obey have are onto the jungler here. Now they want to go for more. Sino, though, bites off more than he can chew. That shield can only save you for so much. And the healing, once again, going to help them out here. Get Adapting topped back off, and with no jungler available for Obey, it's going to make it a little easier to rotate over and force fights that Obey just aren't going to be comfortable with.
Stop me if you've heard this one before. Good macro play from Obey again, that's kind of marred by another individual mistake, this time by Sino. I don't know if he was counting on communication from the rest of Obey if people started crossing over by mid-tier 1, but there's just not enough ward coverage to be able to make that play safely.
Well, Fire Giant once again started up. They're going for the Gold Fury here for Obey, so maybe opting away from this one. Boulder available for inbound, but he's going to go to mid lane, not even looking over for it. So Radiance get a free Fire Giant at the cost of a Gold Fury here. That pressure they already have, only 2 tier 2s left standing, means that they're still going to get a pretty hefty gold swing in their favor.
But Obey is doing the right thing. I mean, I don't think that they can ever win that fight around the Fire Giant with Benji's ultimate up and no Nemalt available in order to try and shut it down. So let's just get what gold we can off the map. Interesting that they aren't choosing to try and take that duo side tier 1. A little bit threatened by Radiance just jamming pressure on this right side Phoenix. So they decide to back up and not get as much global gold as they could have, but also give themselves a good shot at defending.
Tier 2 and right, gone. Tier 2 and mid now, gone as well. And Radiance take that gold lead and extend it a little bit further and further beyond. Essentially just always moving the finish line is what it feels like away from Obey. They're not out of the game, it's just in this awkward moment where the race is just longer than you thought it was going to be. You're starting to get winded at this point. Maybe a lot of it's going to happen around this Pyromancer, what you can do as Aurora comes crashing in. Benji goes up into the big form, but he's getting melted right now by Obey. They're able to get the kill. Sino leading the way this time around, but they lose Wowie in the process. Fields of Love comes down, and now you see Cyclone Spin's late game Cupid and what it's going to be able to apply. That's 3 kills down now on the side of Obey, and with only 2 members left to try and defend it, it's looking like at least a Phoenix, if not the game. They're continuing to chase it down. Big Man Teens locks up a kill with the ultimate on I'm a Monster. Inbound stands between Radiance and the win, and I just don't know this Hercules is going to be enough. Radiance, they're taking game 1.
Obey trying to use that objective focus again, but this time Radiance a little bit too wise to let it go. A fantastic ultimate in from Cyclone at the very end, but the game plan worked for Obey. They want to play around objectives. They want to use this Sunder and Nemalt to kill Benji, and they killed Benji awfully quickly. That's probably the fastest we've seen a Cthulhu die at all in any team fight all year that he's been viable and competitive or available and competitive. But that time Radiance was just a little bit too ready to take the team fight afterwards. Again, I think that overall, we shouldn't be too results oriented. Radiance is one of the hottest teams at the SPL right now. Obey has been pretty ice cold as of late. I think Obey is doing good things macro-wise on the map. When you zoom out and think about not how they executed it, but why they are executing what they're executing, we saw better strides in that game. They just cannot afford to make that many individual mistakes and still beat a team like Radiance.
Well, hey, they've been able to look really good here, and in this game they looked good last week against Space Station as well, so I'm excited to see when they do get that matchup. Like you said, Radiance is one of the top teams, so how they can handle that. But as of now, I guess it is really seeing how they adapt from Game 1's loss into Game 2, so for that, we'll go back up to the desk.
That's right. I'm going to echo kind of what the casters say there, Gormizer and Aggro. You know, it's not this big sweeping fight or a giant misplay for Obey that kind of takes this game away. It's sort of this slow burn. Radiance slowly take away these small objectives from you and then rip it away there towards the end in one final fight. That's not to be surprising though, I suppose, Mifflin. It's kind of Radiance's play style. That's their MO from what we've seen from them. They'll drag you in, small win here, small win there, and then eventually they're far enough ahead that a big deicide at the end will just finish the game.
So I think when a game plays out like that and you can't really look back at one individual moment, you have to address where the bleed started. And for Obey, in this set, you're looking at it right here. I mean, Bobby inbound didn't have a good game, continually getting first flooded on second wave, getting killed while trying to rotate back into mid after a Gold Fury, getting picked out really often. I think he was the first 3 deaths of his team, and you can't have that happen when you're playing a high pressure pick like Hercules. You don't pick Hercules to lose. You don't pick any god to lose. Let me make that absolutely clear. But you absolutely shouldn't be losing on someone like that.
Right, it's really where things started, and I do think you have to give credit to Obey, though, that they held into the game for a decent amount of time, though, and I think, Mifflin, a lot of that thanks to, again, something that Aggro and Gormizer pointed out. I mean, in large part due to some good calls by Obey. The respawning objective sort of kept them in this game.
Yeah, they used that Gold Fury almost as like a bandage or a stint or something to stem out all this poor things happening across the map. Sure, we're losing every single engagement, but we got this little stimulus package inside of Gold Fury a couple times. But it didn't really amount to much. I mean, just take a peek at the slash lines, man. They weren't able to get their feet under them. And I think a game like this, you can look at the small individual plays or even the macro plays, as Aggro was pointing out, where they were to play the map properly. But you're going to have to do more, man. I mean, I'm not saying anything that is news, though. This is pretty standard analysis.
Right.
Obey's got to clean it up.
I agree. They gave themselves a chance in the pick ban phase. Not quite in the in-game, super clean, not giving up these small nitpicky objectives phase. And again, that's exactly where Radiance want to pick you apart. I kind of gasped there for a moment because Benji finishes that game with 22,000 damage. The next highest, also on his team, was at 14,000 damage. Everyone else was beneath half. I mean, Cthulhu just absolutely took this game over. And you wonder now if Obey starts to re-strategize around giving Cthulhu away, or taking Amaterasu away, because I think we were talking about this, Mifflin, especially when you kind of look at the priority in the picks and bans. You know, Cthulhu might just bring a little bit extra, so you have to, I think long and hard about wanting to give that away.
Yeah, I'll do you one better, Dave. He's not doing a little bit extra. He's doing exponentially more than the second best soul laner. Over Amma. I mean, we've seen it.
Right.
If you're not Nika, don't give up Cthulhu for Amma. If your name doesn't start with N and end with you gotta not do it, man.
That's smart.
I mean, it's not gonna work. Yeah, banning out Cthulhu. Big ups to Obey. Smart play. Because I mean, you can't let him get away with that. Benji dominated the map.
He sure did, and he's going to have to do it on a different god this time around. No Cthulhu there. Persephone saw a lot of play in week number 1. Hasn't seen the same level of play since then. Umoja taken away, so that's another Aurora-focused ban. Remember, it was the Hercules picked away, so I wonder if Obey either ban out the Hercules, pick him up first overall, but you got to be wary of what you're giving away, because if Radiance here are in an interesting driver's seat, Mifflin, where there's so many strong picks available right now that you're in kind of a weird spot, I think, having to choose what you want to ban out. In having a player like Aurora who's going to pull that much pressure to his side of things can only benefit you, I think, if you're in that second pick spot.
I think it absolutely can, but already this Cthulhu ban has changed the face of the picks here. If Radiance decide to, they can leave Hercules up again. Obey might take it first pick overall, leaving Amaterasu on the table, which when Cthulhu's banned out is bar none the best soul laner, but instead Radiance ban it out themselves. So what does that leave open? You still have gods like Kronos, you still have gods like Sol, Heimdall, all these priority picks. I mean, we might even see Thor come through here. Obey's gotta make a hard decision now. Do we make sure that Aurora can't go back to the Hercules, even though we weren't able to perform that well on it? Or are we going to go ahead and take the Nemesis? And it seems like Sino wants to reprise his performance.
Yeah, kind of to piggyback off of that, do you like Sino reprising his performance here? Obviously, everything really swinging against Obey in Game 1. With the small bit we've seen, do you think Nemesis is a pick that makes some sense for this Obey team? For Sino, obviously meta-wise, certainly no questions in my head, but specifically in this matchup between Obey and Radiance, do you like the pick?
I think Nemesis in of itself is very strong, but I've always said that Nemesis requires the team to play around you at a very high level.
Right.
Because when you're playing at a solo agent jungler that really doesn't have any form of hard CC in her own kit, you have to rely on the rest of your team to find that CC so you can do the damage. And it seems like, especially with Cynosure, he's the type of player who wants to be doing things almost completely on his own. That's why he was hovering around that duo side of the map when Radiance was grouped up around Fire Giant trying to take that 1v1. That doesn't fit his playstyle. I'd much rather see Cynosure playing a god that has CC, that can do things on his own. I'm thinking gods like Thor, Pele, Ratatasker that are just individualized threats that don't require your team to set you up. But if they're able to play around it, it's been working in scrims, if they want to really draft around this Nemesis, it can absolutely work. We just haven't seen it play out like that just yet for Obey.
Yeah, I don't think you're too far off there, Mifflin, at all. You know, Nemesis, again, in the current meta, certainly viable. I'll have to see if Obey can push that to a win and push us to a game number 3 here. But we're still in picks and bans for game number 2. Cupid once more here for Radiance. Kind of ran away with the early game there in game number 1. Now they've got a Kuzenbo, though. And what we've seen is just kind of this unbridled aggression, you know, usually blinking through, get the extra XP from the Spirit Minion, and then the pushback damage into a Heart Bomb. I mean, you talk about kill pressure. Radiance have got it there on the long lane.
Oh, they really do, man. But if this Soul goes back to the long lane and we see Cupid in the long lane as well, I mean, Aggro already addressed it. Disapparate is a fantastic countermeasure for a lot of that aggression. You're almost never going to get hit by Fields of Love. If you channel Disapparate before the Heart Bomb comes through, you'll likely be able to immune the second tick of it as well. So I like this pick. But with Heimdall likely going to Wowie again, I think this Cupid might go towards mid.
Yeah, it's the flexibility that we're starting to see with a lot of the Hunters, magical ADCs. Cupid has absolutely seen success really in both roles, I think. Bans phase number 2 on your screen now. Set taken away, Kumbhakarna as well, Poseidon and Aphrodite to follow that one up. Robin again for adapting here in game number 2. Game 1 was sort of weird, where again it was kind of this one pick here, one pick there. Eventually there was a big old team fight around the end, but adapting, all things considered, a great game on the Robin in Game 1, countering out a lot of what we saw Obey find success with. I think last week, the early game pressure, trying to build that lead. Robin can keep up with you. Now that is one thing I did not assume I would see here, Mifflin. Your background lighting certainly fits the tone here, as an Isis is going to get locked in.
Isis is the queen of early pressure, early gank potential, early damage. I mean,
Wow.
match it with a Robin, that's kill potential galore in mid. I mean, I don't care if you're setting Soul, I don't care if you're setting Heimdall, I don't care if it's even just a Kepri mid and he loads in at level 5. With an Isis and a Robin coming at you, you're going to be struggling a lot in that early 3v3. I mean, Radiance look like they're trying to draft pressure across the board. Cupid and Kuzumbo going to dominate that duo lane. Isis and Robin going to control the center of the map. It seems like Radiance want to make this a quick one.
Obey are going to bring up Bologna for themselves. We talked a bit about how Benji had some data points of this Bologna out of that solo lane and looked pretty good along the line there. Now we get a look, though, at the Obey full 5 here. Kepri, obviously, for massive utility with the Scarab's Blessing, some lockdown, maybe some fight set up there as well. Heimdall, Soul, they want to scale to that late game. We weren't able to see them get to that point there in Game 1. I want to focus on Obey here before we pivot to Radiance really quick. Do you think Obey have drafted themselves something that works here for Game 2?
I'm worried about their engagement. I mean, Bologna's got the ultimate stun, and then you're looking at Kepri for the Abductor, the root.
Right.
And outside of that, you've got slows and slows from Nemesis. You've got slows and a small knockup from Soul. Heimdall, if he's the one engaging for you, you've probably already lost the fight. I'm worried about how Obey is going to be able to get into Radiance's comp, who is incredibly strong at not only engaging themselves, because they have Sun Wukong, Kuzumbo, Robin, but also disengage. Fields of Love, you're not walking through that. Circle of Protection, you're not walking through that. I mean, even Kuzumbo, if he wants to, can completely pivot his focus from running at the enemy team to turning into a Beyblade and making sure that no one touches his squad.
Oh, it is time, Mifflin. Obey looking to build some momentum. Radiance trying to send them home early here on Saturday. We'll go down to your casters for game number 2.
Thanks again, Dave and Mifflin up there. And Aggro, I love what Obey has done here. Maybe I just happen to love Bologna a lot, and that's maybe bleeding into me loving their draft. But they're not bringing out the things that's the most interesting in the game. It is this Isis on the other side, who the only time we've seen played this year, I believe, was Space Station in Phase 1, and it didn't look great then. What is bringing this out now for Radiance?
I think Radiant just wanted something else that can secure objectives and be a real fighter around these team fights, but primarily around objectives. And that's what I think Scylla's identity has really become for me, is that she's really there to secure your objectives. If she happens to chain 2 or 3 I'm a Monster shots together, then fantastic. But otherwise, we're really using her to secure objectives more than anything else. I think Isis is definitely viable right now. I think that she's definitely a goddess that we should be seeing a little bit more of. I agree with Mifflin that a lot of her identity is still caked into that early game, but I don't think that you can really underestimate it's hard to overestimate, I should say, is a better way to phrase it, the amount of control and help that she brings come mid to late game. I mean, she is really, really annoying as a frontliner to deal with, and she's fantastic against Kepri because she has 2 different forms of CC that will make it very, very easy for Radiance to make sure that these Scarab's Blessings aren't throwing a wrench in their plans of getting early kills.
Well, adapting over here early to the solo lane to try and shut down this Bologna, and successfully doing so. Benji with the last hit, gonna get credit for that one. And I think that's going to showcase a little bit more of what I expect to see from Radiance this game. Last time it was retaliation inbound, maybe taking a misstep or somebody from Obey stepping too far, and Radiance would just punish you for it. This time they have the Kuzumbo to get aggressive. They have the Raven, to get aggressive over there. As you highlighted, this Isis who's going to come online early, silence, stun, damage. And then, of course, Circle of Protection makes great late game. I think this is going to be interesting, if anything, from Radiance to see if they can make it work. A lot of these teams have been playing that little shuffle, right? It's a long phase 2 here, so they know that they can try out some new things. I think Zapman put it best the other day in an interview where he was just saying, you know what, playing just the meta all the time isn't going to prepare you for some of those bigger tournaments. This is after they pulled out set mid, of all things. And I think Isis is a little bit more in the realm of norm than that.
Yeah, I think so too. She's still a mage, right? And you're still bringing magical damage to the mid lane, as you can kind of expect. I think that really the big question mark is, for a lot of mid mages, is how does itemization feel on this character? Does that feel like it's a viable route for us to get the typical meta selections? This time, Obey doesn't have as much sustain. I don't think we'll see as much of a need for anti-heal as we did in the last game, where they had Amma and Hercules alongside this soul. A little surprised that Tings is starting Lost Artifact. I wonder if he's going to try and get a Chronos Pendant early on and really lean into that just control mage sort of identity for Isis. Could also see a Doom Orb working well on this character. She gets a lot of movement speed from Wind Gust. Add a Doom Orb passive on top of that, she becomes pretty hard to lock down, even without having a true mobility spell. So I'm interested to see where Tings is going to go. I do think that Radiant still need a Divine Ruin to deal with Wolfie in these team fights, but that can come a little bit later.
We'll have to see how they prioritize it. Right now, Inbound going to be pushed back over into Cyclone Spin, and this Cupid has been precariously deadly throughout the last 2 games in terms of his setup potential, and I think right now that's all they're waiting for. Radiance is hitting that level 5 mark. Once you have Fields of Love, I think it becomes a lot easier for them. But Obey are having to play so cautiously. One misstep in the duo lane and Aurora is going to be able to find you. A misstep in mid or maybe in solo lane means that adapting could lock you down. So there's just so much, just CC, straight up CC, that is going to be able to catch you out on the side of Obey, that you have to play more cautiously. Every path you take, every step that you're moving forward with has to be weighed against the risks.
And this composition for Radiance is pretty different than what we saw from them at playoffs, where I already talked about it last game. They really liked these late-game team fighting compositions, and Radiance still team fights pretty well with this comp. I don't think it's a bad team fight comp by any stretch of the imagination. They've got plenty of CC, and Inbound's finding that out the hard way, as it looks like another kill might be going over to Radiance in the duo lane. Cyclone will get that one, and Wowie not exactly feeling too good on his way out either. The amount of CC Radiance has in this team composition is very high in the team fighting phase, but it's also a little bit more aggressive than I think what they were picking at the playoffs, and a little bit more prone to snowballing on their opposition. And I think that these sorts of half in, half out compositions, where it's a lot like what they were picking but not exactly like it, I think I like this idea for Radiance. And like you were just saying, you don't want to just be playing the same things over and over again. You've got to show some flexibility. And I think that this is a unique and interesting direction for Radiance to take their team identity that can be very, very successful.
And already we've noticed, at least in my eyes, their ability to hit level 5 first, not just in duo lane, but I think all around right now, has been hurting Obey the most. It's part of why that last fight is just so devastating to Inbound, is more Fields of Love and Aurora being able to spin around and knock him against the wall so much that you can't escape. Now, that's something that was playing a big role for them last time, but when it comes to late game, you know, Circle of Protection, nice big area AoE damage that's going to come through. Same thing for Fields of Love that we got to see. But they don't have that Cthulhu anymore, and Benji, being now on the Sun Wukong, brings his own merits, his own healing, his own safety, but it doesn't have the same level of effect. Do you see that making a big impact on Radiance's late game play?
Definitely. I think that Benji's Cthulhu play last game was a linchpin of how they were able to win so many team fights. So Obey making sure that that doesn't happen here in this one, I think is a pretty wise call from them. But it also means that Obey has to change their strategy as well, because like we were talking about in game 1, I think the way that Obey itemized and drafted was really with Cthulhu in mind. And that's smart, because against strong gods, you just can't give them up without a game plan. And I think that, to Obey's credit, they clearly did have a game plan. It's just the execution was a little bit off once they kind of got on the battleground. So now they've got to try and find a new way to approach these team fights from a different perspective, now that it isn't just picking all these things that let us be able to kill the guy who's supposed to be unkillable in the fights.
Any other assassin, and I think Sino would have gotten caught out right there. And Radiant's still looking for something on this right-hand side of the map. I just unable to find anything that they find worthwhile or can deem worthwhile. Obey doing enough to ward them away from the jungle. And so now that roaming 4-man, now 3-man, is just going to turn right back around, go into their own jungle, and hope for the best for what can come through with it. And I think that's the strength like Obey have. One of the things Khepri brought, and what we talked about a lot in Phase 1, is not necessarily his setup potential. He's not your Hercules or your Kuzenbo who is going to immediately drag someone into their own death. He's the guy that's just going to stop you from killing everybody, or in the event that you're trying to run away, lock you down that way. So I like where he's at now, at least in terms of play. It keeps him a lot safer, and it's kind of different than what I expect to see out of Inbound.
It's a little bit different for sure, but I think that this is a play style that can fit Inbound. He still wants to be in the thick of the action. It's just from a little bit of a different point in that. And I think that you look at the pathing mistakes that Inbound made last game, a lot of that is just knowing that, hey, this is kind of where I want to be as Hercules. Maybe being in a different spot in the team fights will lead to some better positioning and a better team fight overall for Obey. And Khepri can still be an initiator given the opportunity, so I'm not worried about Inbound on this pick too much.
So far, it's fitting the same pace as last game, but you had highlighted this pretty much matching up to what Radiance like to do. And it feels very SSG to me as well. You know, Ghost is the one team that loves to get aggressive almost immediately, but these two teams in Radiance and Space Station want to just win. Not even the old-fashioned way. Like, they're just going to farm better than you, even if you're Obey and you're playing the macro game, the map a little bit better. It didn't make a big difference, and it's because of moments like this. Forcing the ult out of Inbound there is Cyclone Spin. Fields of Love traded out for that res from Khepri. It's going to make a bigger deal just because now you have free reign over there. One kill is going to be a kill instead of a revive coming out from Inbound.
Look at this. Benji's actually on the way over already. Didn't even TP in. Aurora finds Inbound.
Wow. And they're going to lock him down at least as best they can. The damage is going to be there, but there's not enough. They have to dive under this tier 1. One more hit is all they need, but they turn their eyes to Wowie. Instead, Wolfie has rotated on in, but that's the clone Benji running forward there. The rest of Radiance, all 5 of them on this left-hand side of the map, have determined to fall back. And with that kill, they're just going to go ahead and let it rest at that. No Gold Fury attempt. They're going to go back to their own jungle. And Benji's just going to go ahead and teleport back over and start farming again.
A little surprised at Radiance not going for objectives. I thought they could have gone Gold Fury after the purple buff invade earlier, or maybe even right there, but Ting's going to run into some trouble in the jungle in the form of both Sino and Ducky.
Well, Benji's rotated over. Stun should be available for him, but it's going to be Big Man Tings that locks down Ducky this time. Eagle's rally goes up, and Ducky goes down. Adapting, being able to follow up that one pretty easily afterward. No escape there. Picked up for Obey Alliance. Now they're forced to fall back. Sino stays alive throughout all of that, so I think he'd call that a win. And a lot of ults used by Radiance throughout that duration now that are not going to be available, so Obey can maybe press their luck some of these moments in the following... I'm losing my sentence. In the next few minutes.
Hey, no problem. It's a lot of fighting, you know, we're resetting.
Talk for a living.
Both teams are resetting, you're resetting, everyone's resetting. Everyone's feeling good about where they are right now, though maybe Obey slightly less so just because of the kill column, but you actually look at the tangible lead for Radiance, and it isn't much.
Well, Gold Fury started up here by Obey. The reset seemed to work out well for them, but Fields of Love going to come down looking for the steal. Obey secure the Gold Fury. Now the question is if they can get out alive. Inbound goes down. Sino locked against the wall by Aurora, but Aurora just one hit away from dead. Those hearts going to heal him up and keep him in the fight. Cyclone wants blood, and he's looking to get aggressive, but the short-range teleport there from Wowie and the rest of the mobility from the team seems to get Obey out of here safely for now. Adapting, not willing to jump into a tier 2 tower, means they'll be able to disengage, only losing 1 in the trade for the Gold Fury.
Man, that was risky by Obey Alliance. They stood tall in the face of a massive Fields of Love ultimate. Didn't really use anything in order to make sure that they get the Gold Fury guaranteed, except for Wolfie's ultimate, but his secure was true. They're able to secure that Gold Fury pretty nicely, continue to put Radiance in a little bit of an awkward spot, but again, it's kind of like the last game. Remember where Inbound or Ducky gets killed on the Fury, and then Inbound has some bad pathing, he ends up dying, and that opens up the left few towers for the tier 2 and the dive onto Wowie. It's kind of reminiscent of that, where Obey maybe aren't thinking enough steps ahead on whether or not they're going to lose too much on the back end, because if you trade Gold Fury for a kill in mid-tier 1 at this point, I don't think that's really worth it for you. Now you add the Pyromancer into that equation for Obey, who again are doing a good job of being objective-minded. It gets a little bit more even, but I still think that the map pressure that you lose by losing your tier 1 tower in mid does concern me a little bit. So that's something to keep your eye out for here for if you're rooting for Obey.
And it definitely has to be part of the discussion. You know, you are able to get some of these objectives, and this is very similar to last map, where, cool, you've got some of the biggest things on the map, but you're down 5 kills still down 1,000 gold. So where are these objectives making that difference for you? They'll have to try and make a difference here. Inbound, looking to get knocked around here. Has his ult for the res if needed. That's going to be Circle of Protection. Locks him down in place. Adapting jumps in, but they're not able to get the kill here. Instead, they're turning their eyes to Sino, but Sino looks for Big Man Tings, finds him under the tower. Obey turned that engagement around on its head, but Benji's coming up from behind, smacks down Inbound once, and is looking to get aggressive. Ox form comes through. No knockup's going to be here, as we now have Ducky laying in wait in the jungle. Benji goes up on the somersault cloud and has that feel of someone who wants to jump back in, but doesn't have the support from his team, so they're going to fall back, and Obey have the pressure to push down this tier 1.
Easily between the Soul and the Heimdall. They could even continue to push if they wanted to, but they're giving up a lot on this left-hand side, as Cyclone has not made that rotation over. Another 2-level lead for Cyclone, again in the laning phase.
Well, now they're trying to get aggressive. Good stun coming down from Ducky. Adapting goes down, Aurora goes down, and Obey go from 5 kills down to 3 kills down in the blink of an eye. In just a couple of minutes, they lose a tier 1, but the pressure they've gained on this map has been huge, and now Benji forced to bird form away, doesn't have his ult, so lockdown is going to be very solid on the slow from Sino, going to make sure he can't run away too quickly, but he is still a solo laner. He has that Soul Eater and that Sledge. He's just too difficult to take down.
A little bit awkward for Benji, but knows that he's A-okay even with a pretty offensive-leaning build, as Cyclone again forces out Wowie's ult on this left-hand side and going to force him to give up the wave, because that's just a massive lead for Cyclone on that side of the map. I just feel like Obey are able to really punish whenever they're able to get onto towers. And so whatever they can do to continually get towards those objectives is gonna really benefit them, because Radiance, I think, does have the better team fight overall here now with this Isis control, with this Wukong control that they have. And Aurora straight up outplayed Inbound in that little skirmish in mid. He baits out the dash, uses a CC immunity, then gets behind him and knocks him back towards the team. But the CC chain wasn't perfect. It let Inbound get that ultimate off. And then Adapting felt like he was just going to do more damage than he ultimately did on that dive in. It was a good shell from Inbound as well to keep himself alive. Now, then he greeds a little bit and overstays and gets punished by Benji. But regardless, Obey certainly coming out very far ahead in that team fight, because I think that played way more towards their composition strengths, which is getting onto towers and using this auto attack damage between the Soul and the Heimdall.
Well, the thing I'm interested in, as of right now, is really these Hunters rotating in, specifically Cyclone Spin and Wowie, because it's a 2.5, almost 3 levels there in favor of Cyclone Spin that it's causing a lot of trouble, I think, for Wowie when they're not under towers, as you had just highlighted. And this next Oni Fury is probably going to be a very big point of contention to maybe either showcase that or to rectify that and get Wowie the levels that he desperately needs right now to stay pace in this game. Benji going to go ahead and get aggressive. Has the Somersault Cloud again. He's going to be able to eat a lot of CC, but he goes up early. He's going to go ahead and heal up pretty much to full here as Radiance look to put a little bit of pressure onto the Oni Fury. Going to get a little bit of a zone going on, but honestly, with Circle of Protection, it almost feels like objectives are yours for the taking.
A lot of times, yes. I think that Radiance is giving some respect to Obey's dive potential, because between this Bellona and the Nemesis, that's a lot of mobility that you have to deal with and a good amount of crowd control. It's not necessarily hard crowd control, but a ton of slows. They're going to return damage that you're throwing onto them with things like Retribution Shield and the block stacks coming from Bellona as well. So I can understand Radiance's hesitance to be the initiators here, but I do think that they have the advantage when it comes to outright fighting.
Well, Obey are going to start up this Oni Fury. It's 3/4 health as of right now. And Radiance see it, so they know what's going on. It's just where they want to engage first. Aurora blinks in, going for the push, gets inbounded, pushes him all the way back in there, forces the knock-up out of him. Circle of Protection comes down, and Ducky's going to be the first one to fall in the backline. Ults all gone for Obey right now, and Radiance are going to force this fight to keep on going. Double kill for Big Man Tings. Now Aurora sent off through the realms by Heimdall. Looking to come back and is still alive just for a little longer. Wowie finds that kill, but can he get out safely? Adapting, looking for the rotation in alongside Benji. But with Wowie here, Wolfie here, they're going to be able to disengage just quick enough. Unfortunately, that feels like the Oni Fury should go the way of Radiance, so they lose a couple of kills, and they lose this big objective.
Smart to let the Oni Fury stop its channel before they end up pulling it, so they don't have to deal with that debuff that it provides. And really, in these team fight scores so far, I've just been super impressed with the way that Aurora is playing these. Another perfect initiation by him. Gets inbound, pushes him through Ducky to deal the extra damage. Great job by Tings to be ready with the Spirit Ball. They put inbound to 5% health pretty much instantly there.
Well, Obey get Pyro. Now they're going for Fire Giant. Adapting's going to be able to sniff this out, but he doesn't have his ult available yet, so jumping in is out of the question, and it seems like Ducky knows that. They're going to be locking him down, but there's the Wukong, there's Aurora. Obey secure the Fire Giant early on. Now can they get away with it? Wowie looking to get taken down, but is able to use the Bifrost to disengage. Ducky locked up and his ult used, but that's going to be it. Inbound, one hit away, but no! Big Man Tings pops his ability just a second too soon. Benji has to clean it up. They only get one kill after losing that Fire Giant, but it now is Radiance on the aggressive. They're going to take this tier 1 and right.
Great call by Obey. Just really, really smart to know that who lived through that last team fight. It was Sino, Wolfie, Wowie. That means those three have a head start on dealing damage to the Fire Giant because they don't have to wait for respawns. Obey playing to the strengths of their composition around objective damage. And they go with the old Sino FG. Anyone who's in the Sino queues and ranked knows that no Fire Giant is safe as long as Sino is on the map. Rhyme and reason be damned. Now Obey have to find a way to hold on to this Phoenix if Radiance really go for it. But I was going to say, that seems a bit ambitious from the Chaos side, knowing that all 5 are now back up, and the 4 most important members that have to have Fire Giant all have it.
Yeah, jumping into a Phoenix in a 5v5 already seems reckless. When they all have Fire Giant on the defending side, it just seems outlandish to try and do. And Radiance agrees, so they back up. And now the pressure, grabbed by that Oni Fury, dissipating. The minions are all gone. Fire Giant needs to pay a lot of gold, though, for Obey here. Still 5 towers standing on the side of Radiance versus the 2 left for Obey Alliance. So they have to pick up something here. This is where they've been suffering in a lot of these games, is you keep pace the entire time. I mean, we're 20 minutes in, and you're just as in this, but there's no end game state for you yet. You have to get the map to work its magic for you. And a lot of that is in those towers, and so far they are barely able, not even able, to get this tier 1 and right.
I just really like the way that Radiance is playing it. They aren't letting off the gas right now, even though technically they're probably slightly weaker in terms of outright damage in these team fights. But look at the level advantages they still have. They still have 2 levels on Benji, 3 levels on Cyclone, 2 levels on Aurora. They just have the XP advantage in most of their roles. And if they just let Obey spread out the map and get whatever they want, then that's not really going to be the case. Now this fight is a bit scary if you're Radiance, because the guy who's most farmed the whole game, Cyclone Spin, isn't here. He's in left. This is a 5-on-4 when Obey has FG.
Now trying to get that split push for a tier 2, but Sino coming up behind the rest of Radiance looking for something. Ducky goes in deep, and that's going to be the res from inbound to make sure it stays a 5v5. Sino looking for the pick, and he's going to be able to find 1, maybe able to find 2 or 3. Aurora goes down thanks to Ducky. Adapting is TKO'd out of the fight, and Benji is left on his somersault cloud. They lose a tier 2 though, and you can see Obey trying to wonder, do we go back for the Phoenix? Do we push what we have? They send Sino back. Cyclone's not there anymore. Now they have to get this right-hand Phoenix to make it worthwhile. Fields of Love going to come down. Going to lock up Ducky, but that's it. And there's not enough follow-up to save the Phoenix. And it doesn't look like there's going to be enough follow-up to really save the fight. They get rid of Ducky, so that's another member without Fire Giant. But they don't have a lot of fight potential here. Inbound, no health, no mana. Might be an easy target, and Benji's going in with the Tiger Stun. They just don't have the chase potential.
It's a really weird call, I think, by Radiance to be willing to take that fight on tier 2. I think trading tier 2s, again, isn't ideal. I think I would have liked to see Radiance stay grouped on that team fight and just bring Cyclone with them. But if Cyclone does want to push left, if that's what Radiance wants him to do, then I think you probably need to trade tier 2s right there. But Obey does a great job. I mean, I thought that was a fantastic fight from them. Ducky really trusts in Inbound. Inbound had perfect timing on that ultimate in order to bring him back. Sino had a fantastic flank around the backside. Wolfie's ultimate found multiple members. I mean, that was just good team fighting from Obey, but Radiance didn't have their strongest member there. So it just felt like an odd fight for them to be willing to take in that moment. If you're giving up that tier 2, you've just got to give it up and not put yourself in a position to be initiated on like Ducky was able to find.
Well, 22.5 minutes into this one, at least in my eyes, this feels like the best Obey we've gotten to see all year in terms of their team play. So I hope this becomes a more consistent mark for them. Because keeping a team like Radiance on their toes, even if it is without Cyclone Spin in the fight, is still very prominent in my eyes. But they've pushed up in right lane, so those fire minions aren't going to be threatening them. Gold Fury available over here. I think this next fight is going to be able to do a lot. Fire Giant about to respawn, so no buff around the belt of Obey anymore. They're going to go ahead and look to start this up, but you had mentioned it about towers earlier. I think it's just true about objectives in general. The shred they have between a Soul and a Heimdall is just ridiculous onto a Gold Fury there.
Does not take long, but a good idea by Radiance. That's just not an objective that's worth dying for because it's regular Gold Fury. If that's Oni Fury,
Yeah.
maybe even Primal, you're a little bit more concerned, but at this point all that does is truly even the game in gold between these two squads. But Obey, in even games around Fire Giant fights, should have the advantage. So that's what they need to do, is group up around Fire. How well can they keep Radiance zoned away to let their auto attackers deal the damage for them?
Well, you said it earlier, no Fire Giant is safe with Sino around, although right now it's Radiance that are going to take control of the pit. They get the Pyromancer, no problem. The ward coverage seems to be a little bit in favor of Red over here as well, as they recognize where Obey is. Fire Giant not going to be started up. A little too risky now, but Aurora holding that angle and looking for that blink that he's been getting so consistently to start off these engagements. Right now they've separated Obey up, and the question is whether or not they can win either the 3v3 over here in the Fire Giant pit or that 2v2 that looked like it was going to be mounting in mid. But now Wowie's showing off what you had mentioned about Heimdall, I believe in game 1, where it's just around a Fire Giant pit. He can see you through these walls. He knows where you're going to be, and they can plan themselves around that. So Obey might have the strongest advantage here.
It's really, really difficult to play around as a jungler in particular who wants to try and flank around the back or go down this mid path. It's hard in order to sneak up on a Heimdall for sure. And normally in these objective burn comps, you'd want something like Rom or just someone with Artemis, someone with a big attack speed steroid that can really help you slam objectives. But Heimdall, even though his objective DPS as a character is on the lower end of Hunters because of his base attack speed and his attack chain, the information he brings makes him super valuable here.
Well, Fire Giant hinted at by Obey, but it's Ducky right now. CC chained against the wall, trying to get away. Has his ult for a disengage if he needs it. You don't want to use it this soon. Already at 1/3 HP, Tiger Stun comes through, and that's going to force the ult out of Inbound of all people to try and keep him alive. And Radiance turn their attention instead towards Sino and the rest of the Fire Giant pit. Ducky stays alive, but it costs him the res, and that might end up biting Obey right back a little bit later.
That's big to get the res out from Inbound, but Radiance a little bit poked because of that, particularly the front line. And now Aurora doesn't have Blink, and you think about the best fight that Radiance has had, it started off of that Kuzenbo's Blink. So Radiance don't get that ultimate entirely for free. They have to pay some sort of cost, but still a cost worth paying. And meanwhile, they've gotten up that right side Phoenix. So Radiance have juggled everything they needed to juggle up until this point. Now, as soon as they get a chance, they're going to start fire.
And that's exactly what they're going to start up right now. 1/3 taken off of the Fire Giant. And Inbound's hanging around here, but we've seen him be a casualty of war more often than not. Circle of protection, drop down, Ducky jumps right on into it. It's going to pop right there, and the fight goes on. A good stun from Big Man, but it's not going to save his life. Ducky for the mid laner gets traded out here, and Obey are about half health. Benji trying to get aggressive, adapting, looking to blink in onto Sino. Everyone on Obey is about half health, but adapting's going to get turned on. He was left alone by his team. The rest of Radiance nowhere to be found. Cyclone Spin, the only one healthy enough to maybe get in here and do some damage. Benji doing his best to pave the way for him, but they lost 2 of their strongest members, only traded out Ducky, and now with the res back up, not even necessary there, but good warding from inbound to make sure that Wolfie won't go down and Obey walk away winners from that one.
Just a really, really, really early ultimate from Big Man Tings. I mean, we are talking showing up 6 hours early for your dinner reservation early. You know, like, what is this guy doing sort of early? That was way ambitious, and good job by Ducky to not show any fear and just hop right on in there, because you just don't want to let Radiance earn all that space for free when you've got to realize that that ultimate isn't going to do what Radiance really wants it to do.
Well, picked up one more time as Fire Giant, Aurora, Benji, Cyclone all here. Fields of Love not off cooldown just yet, but Aurora and Benji going to do whatever they can. Obey, secure the Fire Giant. Now they're turning on to Benji. He's going to get taken down. No, onto the Somersault Cloud just in time. Unfortunately for Aurora, he doesn't have the same potential. Bird form going to get this Wukong on out of there, and Cyclone stays alive in the waiting grasp of Big Man Tings. But now with a Fire Giant on all 5 members, Obey Alliance can look to barrel down these last couple of towers.
This is a great spot for Obey to be in, and Benji just finds himself in an awkward spot. Bird forms around the corner to meet up with Wolfie, and that's good news for Radiance in the sense that the Soul, the best tower killer there is on the map right now, isn't joined up with Obey. That means that it won't be a Phoenix Siege right away, but Radiance is now in a very awkward position because Isis on the defense has a lot more trouble finding room to find these impactful Spirit Balls. Her poke over the wall is good if she can find Spirit Balls on a backliners, but as soon as that cooldown is down, she's going to get jumped on by Sino and Ducky. They're not going to let her free cast every single Spirit Ball from over the wall. And now you're looking at a team fight that, even though it's technically advantageous for Radiance on their side of the map, underneath their structures, that's what Obey is best at, is killing your structures really, really quickly, and now they've got a Fire Giant to help them.
And there's one tower left standing, but Obey, this is the first time we've really got to see them take an early game fight and not even lead. I mean, they were kind of behind Radiance for a lot of this and turn it into something. And now this, almost 30-minute game so far, it does feel like it could go either way, but I mean, the scales are tilting towards Obey. It's not something you get to see too often here. So Radiance have a lot of work cut out to try and slow this down, but Obey are being very patient with this Fire Giant buff. They're not pushing down that left-hand tower just yet, and I'm wondering if they're losing a little bit of time because of it.
Definitely. I wonder if it's because of Wolfie's Aegis being down, but it's not like this is a composition that really you desperately need Aegis against every single fight. I agree that I think Obey is probably playing this one a little bit too slowly. Now they only have about a minute and a half on this FG by the time they get anywhere near a Phoenix, if at all.
Well, they're going to go ahead and get into Radiance's jungle this time around. Minions pushed up over here by Wowie. And so, at least in terms of aggression, I think they aren't going to be met with much around this tower. It should fall no problem. It's whether or not they want to fight in the jungle that's going to confuse me a little bit. Radiance up to fall back, and I think this is a good call for them. That tower might as well not exist now that Wolfie has joined the fray. And now the Phoenix is going to be in a little bit of trouble. Ducky looking to either join the fight over here in a 5v5 and go on in. So whether or not they think they can fully confirm it is going to be the question. That's going to be the jump in from Ducky. That's the initiation. There's the Fields of Love as well. Ducky going to die overall to the Phoenix in time for the res to pull him right back, and now he's half health and in the engagement once again. Aurora almost taken down, but barely alive. Sino goes too deep and ends up losing his life, but the Phoenix is picked up for Obey. They're on the retreat. They did manage to get something, but adapting isn't done here. He goes ahead and jumps in. Everyone on Obey forced to turn tail and run. They don't have the lockdown. This is the same thing that happened to Radiance earlier. They just can't keep up with the movement speed of Obey right now, but they're not going to stop trying.
No, they're going to try and chase them down, but I don't think there's really any way that Radiance is able to catch them in this position. Trading Sino for the left side Phoenix, absolutely worth Obey's time. Ducky is just commanding so much attention in these team fights, and I think Radiance is really overcommitting onto him pretty consistently. I mean, Big Man is pulling the trigger on that circle of protection pretty much instantly as soon as he gets Nem ulted. And with Big Man and Cyclone so close together, it's really easy for Ducky to pull all that attention from both of these carries at the same time. It's been Cyclone drops Fields of Love as soon as Ducky ults in, and then it's a whole bunch of ISIS buttons on top of him, save for the ultimate. But obviously they're going to get Ducky's going to get rezzed in that spot. That's the position that Khepri puts you in as a backliner, is that you feel like you're in a no-win position. If we just try to ignore the Bellona, she's going to kill us. If we don't try to ignore the Bellona, then we end up putting ourselves in a losing position because we've used all of our important cooldowns on a character who's going to be pulled back to safety anyways. And Obey's just playing around this Khepri really, really well. Inbound hasn't missed a critical res up until this point and has been in the right spots in order to get Ducky back into safety. And I love the way that Ducky and Cyno are trading backline aggro really effectively so far in this game.
Well, we're entering a period in the game where, at this point, genuinely anything can happen. All towers taken down. One Phoenix right now is gone, and that's on the side of Radiance, as we just saw. And Blessings, there's only 2 of them that I still see existing, so we're hitting that point in the game where all of these items are going to exist. But Radiance, unlike Game 1, I believe it was, or earlier in this game, actually, it's just been so long, aren't going to be pushing up that wave. Benji now finally committed over there. But now it's a 5v4 with this Fire Giant up, enhanced as well. So it's going to be, I think, an even bigger fight. Whoever wins this has the potential not only to just take the win. If it's Radiance, they take the set, but if they're Obey, I think they prove a solid point.
Love the way that Obey's playing this. They don't rush it. They just wait until they see Benji show up on the left side wave, and then they get aggressive.
Well, unfortunately for Ducky, this time the res is going to come through, but he doesn't have a Phoenix to burn him down, so that res is just going to help him get out of there. But he's TKO'd. He doesn't have the healing to stay in the fight and in the engagement, so he's going to have to back off. But Teleport is available, and so is his Ankh. So coming back in, he can still be just as impactful. No ult available for him. Now it's going to be Radiance starting up the Fire Giant. Circle of Protection available. Big Man used it a little too early last time around. Now they're just trying to bait anyone on the side of Obey out. And it might end up being inbound, but Benji is the one who's forced to run away. Tries to get into the Somersault Cloud, and again, just barely able to get up there in time. The healing not going to work out for him, so he has to fall back, and that's another solo laner that has been taken away. But the Fire Minions are pushing down the Titan as of right now. You have to be paying attention to this, because it's going to be 3/4 health by the time this actually gets eliminated. If Obey take the Fire Giant, that's game.
And now Benji has to stay and push out that wave once again, if he doesn't want that to happen. And what do you know? Obey straight back to fire.
Oh, Circle of Protection still available here, is whether or not Big Man can use it, but he's not going to be able to. Ducky dives right back onto the ISIS. It's going to be dropped to burn him down. They get the kill, so they get rid of the threat that Ducky has been commanding. Now Cyno locked up around the wall, but it's going to be Aurora eliminated by Wolfie in the 1v1 on the side. So you trade frontline for frontline. Benji unable to join the fight still, though, means it's a 4v3. It's all these carries for Radiance. A lot of damage on the board, but no one to really lead the way into the battle for them.
Yeah, it's really up to adapting to be the frontliner. That's not really Robin's strong suit anymore now that he's an assassin. But Radiance are going to escape this one with a pretty good position, honestly, in this game, it looks like, because Benji has pushed out every fire wave on the left-hand side. Left side Phoenix is up, and now he can rotate in. But again, that doesn't mean fire's safe.
It's going to be half health now. Obey looking for someone to pluck. Cyno going to try and lock down Cyclone Spin, but it's not going to be enough. The res put onto Cyno here. They're not going to burn him down fast enough to proc it, so he's 1/4 health. And guess who's here? It's Benji rotating in from the side. Nothing big yet, but that Tiger Stun being available means the lockdown and just the whole flow of the fight has turned in favor of Radiance. It's enough to get Obey out of here. And now they're going to be the ones trying to start up this Fire Giant. Only Wolfie and Wowie remain in the fight. Ducky has respawned. Aurora has respawned, and they're going to be able to get in this, but it's whether or not they can do it in time. Wolfie going to be the closest one around. Circle of Protection dropped on time this time, and it's going to be able to help them get this Fire Giant and ward off Obey.
Really impressive stuff right there, but it looks like Obey isn't done. They're looking for Cyclone.
Yeah, Ducky jumps in, and unfortunately for Ducky, it looks like his health bar is going to go. Benji, credit for that kill. Oxform right on out of there. The knockups are going to be great, but he lost adapting in the process. It doesn't matter. The solo laner has a double kill. Benji going to be able to do so much for him. The stun now on to inbound. Only 2 members left alive for Obey, and it doesn't look like it's going to be enough. Inbound trying his best, but he's just not fast enough. Pushed against the wall is Wolfie, and thanks to the Fire Giant, thanks to the fight, Radiance win this set 2-0.
Really impressive play from Radiance, man. I mean, that is a very difficult spot against a very good team composition at punishing you in fights like that. Feel like Obey played really well in this one. I don't know about the call to go in at the very end there is an understandable one to make. It just ends up being the wrong call. Maybe they'll look back at that Fire Giant and think, could we have gotten more than just the left side Phoenix? But overall, I think what we should be taking away from teams like Obey and United right now and Renegades when they look like they're struggling, we cannot be too results-based oriented. Did we see progress from Obey? I think undeniably, yes, in this set. They really put Radiance into a lot of bad spots in a row. I just think Radiance really juggled their responsibilities on that Fire Giant fight phenomenally well. I mean, Benji getting out with that sliver of HP makes all the difference in the world. The fact that he cancels the 72 transformation so he stays out of the middle of the slice and dice so he doesn't get double damaged from it, lets him get up into the somersault cloud, which then lets him push out left, which then lets him rotate all the way into the back of the team fight, which then buys enough space for Fire Giant. MOBAs are nuts, dude. Everything is so interconnected, and it's just those little tiny things that make the difference between winning and losing.
I mean, it's this rare event where Obey, they literally play in a way where you're not allowed to make mistakes or else you lose the game. And so Radiance just go, yeah, okay, we won't make mistakes then. They played everything from that moment exactly the way they needed to. And, well, it works out for them here. It was the best Obey we got to see, but unfortunately for them, it's still a 2-0 in favor of Radiance. So now let's go to the desk and see how they were able to get that win.
Oh, it's undefeated still for Radiance, tied up at top with Ghost and SSG. A master of all 5 roles here in this game are Radiance, and you at home can be a master of all 4 elements in-game right now. The Avatar Battle Pass still going on. Skin for Aang, Korra, and Zuko. 2 skins, actually, for each of them as the Battle Pass continues on. Time is running out, though, so make sure to get in-game, grab yourself the Battle Pass, pick up all those sweet skins. They look great, and a lot more Avatar content in-game now as well. Mifflin's still with me, though, to break down not only Game 2, but the entire set now. I echo the guys again. I mean, this is probably the closest Obey have been to a game win so far this phase. Hard to win, though, when the team you're going up against makes almost no mistakes at all.
I mean, Obey's had a rough go of it, right? 3 of their 4 sets have been against 3 of the top teams in the league. But I think let's address Game 2 real quick. They were in the driver's seat for a long portion of it. They really looked like they were about to take the dub. They clear out that left side Phoenix. But that last Fire Giant push, 4 members of Obey decided to completely back off away from it, allowing BMT on this ISIS and the rest of his team to group up for free. If you allow a team that has an ISIS on it to set up on an objective, they're going to out-confirm every single person no matter what.
Right.
Circle of Protection is that good at confirming objectives. Obey just kind of misplay and giving up the space.
Well, remember, this is where a lot of the game from the 20 to 30 minute mark was taking place in the Radiance base. Obey fought back from a pretty poor early game to be in a spot to maybe win the game, contested the FGs pretty well. Unfortunately, fall a little bit short here. Radiance move themselves again up to that continue their undefeated streak so far here in Phase 2. 8-0-6 is Benji on the Sun Wukong here in this game. We talked about the solo lane matchup going into this game, Mifflin, and how important it would be. Benji, and Radiance as a whole, we talked about, didn't make many mistakes, but I think Benji had a near flawless performance today.
Yeah, he looked incredibly good on this Sun Wukong pick. Gone are the days where we can say that Sun Wukong is the I don't want to get decided god, because he's starting to really make things happen, and I think a lot of it has to come down to the change for 72 transformations. That third ability, now you don't have to level it up if you want to boost the stun duration. I mean, it makes a huge difference. You can start to max out Master's Will. It does so much more damage, and it's up so much more often that he's able to just be an absolute menace in the team fight.
So what's wild about these standings is either you're undefeated or you are negative in the win-loss department. SSG, Radiance, Ghost have not lost yet. Of course, you can see that there. And then Sanguine, everyone else down from there is 1 and something or 0 and something. So a little bit of parity early on here. Granted, the top teams haven't played one another yet, so we'll see those matchups over the next few weeks. Ghost Gaming, SSG, the first of those undefeated matchups tomorrow to kick things off on Sunday. To round out the day, though, Mifflin, similar matchup, different mindset. Sanguine E United, quick thoughts on that one. How close do you think it'll be?
I think it could be incredibly close because E United are looking really strong despite having a rough start to the split. But I think it's really a proving ground for Sanguine. When we have these high expectations of this team, we really say, well, they're going to be top 3, they're going to be top 4, and they haven't quite shown us that in Phase 2. If they're not able to take a commanding win, if it goes 2-1 in favor of Sanguine, that's not enough to prove it to me. I need a commanding win over E United for Sanguine to live up to their own hype.
Fair enough. We'll get to see that matchup right after a quick break. But first, we got to sit down, or we are going to get to sit down with one of the winners of this big set. Radiance standing by for an interview.
Thanks a lot. Yeah, I'm down here with Biggie. And Biggie, I've got to ask, going into that, I think the pregame interview hinted at not being too worried about Obey going into that set. I just want to know, has that changed after them giving you a little bit of a run for your money in Game 2?
I mean, they definitely improved. I think they had a very specific game plan. They obviously wanted to avoid fighting us, I guess, and just be able to blow up objectives in front of us. So I think they played well considering the game plan they had, but I feel like we made some pretty rookie mistakes. We were a bit slow around the map, and then we took some fights which we just shouldn't have. There was no reason for us. It was just, I guess maybe it's like disrespect or just laziness, but yeah, I think credit to them, they played well with what they planned to do.
Well, I know as a coach, you had to be really proud being able to watch, sit back and watch, because that last Fire Giant fight, or extended fight, I guess, the entire dance, ended up just being beautifully played from your entire team. I mean, there's a lot of moments where if they make one misstep, the game goes to Obey and everything's over there and you have to go to Game 3. So how do you stay that level-headed? How are the boys keeping themselves in the moment there so that they don't trip up at all?
I think the good thing about our team is there's not really any tilt. Kind of when things go wrong, there's not really any blaming or long discussions. It's kind of, okay, this happened, now what are we doing? And I feel like we have a lot of trust in each other, and as a team that even with 2 Phoenixes down, 3 Phoenixes down, we can win games against any team. So, I mean, I was a bit nervous just watching, but probably more frustrated at the mistakes we made, and I still feel like we could have won the game at kind of any point, and we just happened to. So,
well, hey, now you're 4-0. You're tied at the top, so it still comes out the way you want it. Obviously, it sounds like you have some things you want to work on, but it looks like an exciting Phase 2 here for Radiance as we go into the future. So, congratulations once again on your win, and thank you for your time.
Thank you.